The positive leadership stuff for me, the two pieces to it are around why leadership matters in the first place and the actual positive leadership training itself. And that training involves a few pieces. But to start, what I always want to help people understand is that if we want to help a dog, we have to think like them. There's no use applying fish psychology to a dog, bird psychology to a dog. No better is it to actually apply human psychology to the dog because they're not humans. Now, of course, there's lots of similarities and nuances that we kind of compare, right? And I think for a lot of people, they get a little too hung up on some of those things. And for others, they don't show enough. So what I like to say is try to see the world through their eyes, right? And see what's going on for them. Now, part of the goal here with leadership isn't hurting the dog, isn't beating the dog down, isn't condemning them. It's actually about building them up and taking responsibility from them, saying, look, you don't have to worry about all these things in the world. I got you covered. I'm gonna take care of all those responsibilities. You just get to be a fun-loving guy, no problems. What often happens in training is we have kind of these three pillars. So we've got training, we've got the energy of the dog and the humans, we've got whether we're consistent or not. And in there, inside of training, there's lots of different tools we use, whether it's muzzles and leashes and harnesses and all the stuff, right? Um, Under energy, obviously, that's pretty straightforward. That's how are we feeling at any given time and what's our overall energy state. And then the consistency stuff is, of course, how frequently are we replicating the same positive or negative reinforcement for the dog? Um, the problem with that is those standing by themselves don't solve the problem because the dog actually needs someone leading them, right? And this is where it does draw a very common line with humans. I would say we're the same. If my young kids don't have solid leadership from my wife and I, they're going to go off on paths far greater from where we'd like them to be, and more often than if we show strong leadership in a kind, compassionate, gentle way, right? We don't have to beat our kids. We don't have to scream at them every day. But when we lead them from this place that makes sense to them, as far as what leadership looks like as a child, and the things that I would say are important there are trust, respect, following through on promises, all that good stuff, right? Makes us good leaders to our children, listening, being able to be attentive to them. To a dog, those things, some of them apply, right? Trust, respect, being attentive and listening to some degree, but how do you listen to a dog? It's not quite the same as a human. So my point here is that when we get into just training these three pillars, we forget about the leadership foundation, what ends up happening is the building falls over. It doesn't stand well on its own. So we're going to dive into the leadership today. And for me, there's a few pieces to that I define it with. So what does it actually mean to be a good leader to your dog, and why does it matter? For me, we look at putting the needs of the pack first. What does that look like practically? So what does it look like to put the needs of the family first? What does it look like to lead from the front? Setting healthy boundaries, management of the environment and our energy, and then are we offering clear and concise messaging to our dog? Is that happening? So for me, being a good leader really boils down to leading from a place of calm. Because if our primary goal is to help our dog grow and learn and become a good canine citizen, when we lose control, we demonstrate a lack of leadership to our dog. That's how they see us when we're out of control. So if we're over aroused ourselves and screaming and yelling and upset, our dog writes us off. They're like, no, you don't have what it takes. They might oblige because they're a bit afraid or they're a bit of whatever, right? And I'm not saying you guys are yellers. Lots of people aren't. Everyone, I think, has moments where they go to a place of losing a bit of control. That's just human nature. The point, though, is when we make it our primary focus to try to be calm, despite what our dog's doing, and when we look at it from this place of, I want to help you grow and learn, not you're a bad dog, stop doing that bad thing, then we can actually help the dog. And so we show them leadership when we're calm, not when we're out of control. So what does it actually look like then to put the needs of the pack first? So what does that mean? In our daily lives, we find ourselves doing a lot more giving than we get. It's obviously this is a good thing. This can be displayed in different ways, right? We might be helping a coworker, could be that we're driving the kids around somewhere, could be that we're helping a spouse or a parent with something that they need. There's lots of areas, lots of ways that could be. Maybe you help someone load their groceries in the trunk of the car. Who knows? I mean, maybe not during COVID, but in general. When it comes to our dogs, we often have a habit of thinking of ourselves first. And I don't think it's with intention, and I don't think we even realize we're doing it. And the reason I say that is that we often overwhelm our dogs with love, which stops us from truly understanding what they need. So we come from this place of love, 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 but then all of the boundaries and management goes kind of way down, right? And again, I don't know to what extent that's true for you guys. I suspect there's varying degrees depending on the member of the family. And that's kind of why this is important, that the whole family has an opportunity to hear this and kind of get on the same page. Um, so we do our best, but when we offer only love and affection without the clear guidance and boundaries we need, we're actually working against what matters to us, which is helping our dogs live those happy and healthy lives, right? So what does that mean then? To start, it's really important to me that as a family, that as each individual of the family, we're leading the dog from the front. And just as a human family has kind of the head of the household, could be a husband, wife, could be grandma and grandpa, could be whatever the dynamics of the family are. There's typically going to be some people that are in charge of making the big decisions for the household. We want to apply a similar mentality to how we lead our dogs. And so we're not talking about dominance, but we're talking about guidance from a place of wisdom and understanding. So understanding what to do, but also understanding the dog's perspective and where they're coming from. Okay. And so it's essential that our dogs learn this and learn to look to us for the direction and that they trust us to make the big decisions in their lives. They still get to make lots of smaller choices and decisions within their day, but it's done more in a safer environment where they're not in charge of who's allowed to come in the house and who's not. They're not allowed to decide when they're going to interact with the humans and when they're not. They're going to be given guidance around those types of things. So by definition, if we're letting our dogs lead us in any capacity, whether it's through the front door, charging people, charging meals, going after dogs whenever they want to play, but no real boundary in place, what ends up happening is we're actually not leading anymore. They are, right? So they're making all the decisions. So therefore, they must be leading because we can't, and even from a physical standpoint, on a walk, for example, if the dog is way out in front of me all the time and pulling me, they're leading. There's no way around it. I'm following the dog. If I'm recalling my dog and end up chasing it to try to capture it, I'm following it. It's leading me. And so we want to turn that around so that we're actually doing the leading and the dog chooses to follow of their own free will, not that we've, coerced them or forced them to do it. Because when they choose it for themselves, it's much more powerful. So what do healthy boundaries look like? Boundaries are kind of like the house rules. So everyone who lives with the dog should come to agree and adhere to the same set of rules. So it could be as simple as is the dog allowed on the couch or not? Is the dog allowed to sleep in beds or not? Is the dog allowed to greet people at the door or do they have to wait till they come in? Or what does it all look like, right? Is the dog allowed in the kitchen when we eat or do they have to stay out? Or is there a specific spot they go when we eat? All these types of things, we want to have a family review together and think about what's best for us, land on the same page, write it down and put it on the fridge, and then stick to it. Because that consistency sets your dog up to win. If you have three different people doing three different things, it really hurts the dog's ability to understand what's expected of them. And then they're not at fault anymore. We are, right? We've made it harder for them because they really don't know what is and what isn't allowed. Dogs are very logical. And so when we repeat the same thing over and over, they see the patterns, they understand what to do. Doesn't mean they always do it. They're still kind of living beings, right? They still have choice in their mind. So they still make choices and they're not always the right ones, but neither are ours. So, we offer grace in that and then we set up stronger management so that the boundaries are set in place and working. So managing environment, what does that look like? First, we have to understand it, right? So I personally use the energy meter to make it easier to apply my understanding of different situations that my dog might be in. And then I take it and say, okay, what things can I physically do to manage this environment in order to set the dog up to win. Now, the energy meter is a scale from 1 to 10, and it offers a bit of insight as to how our dog might react in a given situation. So trigger stacking may also apply in a role for a given behavior. And trigger stacking is simply where the dog is exposed to multiple arousable things, and it kind of stacks up for them to the point where the next thing puts them over the top, which we would call their threshold. So when they can't take it anymore. It's similar to like if you, for example, woke up one morning just before you get out, or just as you're getting out of bed, you stub your toe. Then you go downstairs and you spill coffee on yourself. Then you go out the door and you forgot to bring something that you needed. By the time you get to work or wherever you're going, you're just the first person to say anything to you. You're on edge. You're losing it already, right? Same with the dog. We stack all these little things in for them, and then they end up reacting, and we wonder why, what went wrong. It's not always the thing that caused it. Sometimes it's the 10 things before that we didn't notice. And so this tool of energy helps us in some ways. And I use it in anything from training to walking to the dog park and everything in between. And I'm not just monitoring my dog's energy, I'm also monitoring mine, and I'm monitoring the other dog and their owner's energy to see if it's even worth having an interaction or not. So the energy meter itself is looking at 0 to 10. So 0 is asleep. We jump up to awake, relaxed, aware, alert, staring, focused, locked on, and then from there on, it's good luck. Basically, once you're in the red zone, the only thing that you can do to help your dog is create more distance. So, and it doesn't mean that they're acting aggressively either. If they're just so focused and so aroused that they can't think anymore, we have to bring them back down from that state and get them to calm down. Okay, and if we're in that state, it's no better. We're going to have a problem recovering. Okay, the last piece to this leadership matters part is the clear and concise messaging. So something to be thinking about when you ask your dog to do something is, do they really know what you're asking? It's important that we engage with our dog in a way that they actually understand. Because they don't speak English, often we'll use English language as our primary because that's how we communicate. But dogs are much more in tune with body language. So when we actually look at things from their perspective, we start to see when they're kind of like, I'm not sure what you're asking for, or they start offering behaviors because they want to do something right, but they're not really sure what to do. So all I tell people is the next time, and then the next time, and the next time that you ask your dog to do something, ask yourself if it seems like they understood what you wanted, knowing that they don't speak English. Right? So that they have no comprehension of the English. Do they understand what you're asking? And is there a way that we can offer clear and concise messaging to them? In this section, we're going to go over the positive leadership training and why this is so important. It has 5 components. So we're going to look at that now. Basically, we have feeding. That's number 1. We have what do we do after each separation, and I'll define that for you, what a separation means. We have everything on your terms. We have danger or perceived danger, and then we have the walk itself. So let's jump through each one. We start with feeding. Feeding is a pivotal time for your dog. It's a great time for when leaders have an opportunity to show up for our dogs, because it allows us to demonstrate really that we're good providers for our family. Of course, dogs love food, and they care about food far more than anything else in their life. For us as humans, we care about the types of clothes we wear, the car we drive, the house we live in, the vacations we get to have, the things and experiences we can have with our kids. There's lots of things, some material and not so. Dogs are about food. Of course, they enjoy interaction and play and those pieces too. But if you had to put a list of things that your dog cares about most together, I think food would be at the top of it. And it's because it provides life, and they know that. They do come from a place where, ancestrally being descended from wolves, but then living in villages as village dogs and slowly progressing to living in the homes and all that good stuff. Food is at the forefront for them to survive. So what we do to make sure that they understand how things are supposed to be set up is we have to feed them in a way that makes sense to them at an instinctual level. And for dogs, I like to use the example of let's picture a village dog who lives with has some pups, who lives with some other dogs. They kind of roam around. They control a certain area of a village, or it is their village, and that's it. So typically in that scenario, you're either going to have dogs who get scraps from people or eating out of garbage reservoirs or whatever it looks like. And while this isn't true in our context that we personally live with dogs, it's still very true all around the world. And even in northern parts of our province, there's lots of dogs who live on the streets, and that's just how they live. But for the sake of feeding, what happens is mom is never going to let the other dogs in their family eat before the kids. Kids go first. Then mom's going to eat because mom knows she needs to be able to be strong to protect the family and protect the kids. Then she's going to allow the others to come in and take what's left. The order that they eat matters. And if one of the other dogs tries to come in while the pups are eating, she's going to tell them off. She's going to make them leave. You can't eat here right now. We're eating. The same idea exists in our the same dogs who live with us. They're still that same dog. Now, we know that there's an abundance of food and all of those things, and our dogs learn over time that feeding schedules happen. I typically eat at this time of day. But as far as leadership is concerned, if our dogs consistently eat before us or have the opportunity to graze all day long, they start to have a bit of a control over the food, and they shouldn't, because as leaders, it's something that we provide. It's not something that they produce and control. It's something that we give. So the way that we do this is simple. We feed our dog after us. So if we eat dinner at 6, the dog eats at 6:30. Or the dog eats at 4 and we eat at 6. If there's an hour, 45-minute gap before us, it doesn't matter. They're not going to relate that they ate before us. It's not a big deal. Same with breakfast. If they're eating breakfast an hour before us, doesn't matter. But if normally it's fairly close together, I feed my dog while I'm prepping my meal, that's problematic for the setup for leadership. So we want to make it that they are going to eat after us or way before. Okay. The second thing we can do with food is gesture eat. So before we place the dog's bowl down, we just simply take a Cheerio, a cracker, piece of bread or crust off of bread, and we just hold the bowl and we just eat it over top. Then we place the bowl down. Wait, please. Okay, go ahead. Right? It's not about teasing the dog. It's just about demonstrating uh, in a real capacity that I'm physically eating before you, and now you can have yours. Go ahead, no problem. And this is what we call gesture eating. And I recommend early on in the process of converting leadership that we do this at every meal. And you can have everyone in the household take turns in preparing and prepping the meal and actually doing the eating, the gesture eating over the bowl, because this puts all the humans on a level playing field. Where they're socially in the social hierarchy of the household, they live above where the dog does, right? And again, it's not about being demeaning to the dog or any of that. It's just about a practical way that we can show leadership for our dog in a tangible way that they understand. The last piece to feeding is that we remove the bowl if they leave any food or move away from it. So if you put the bowl down and your dog goes over, sniffs the bowl, and walks away, the bowl comes up. They get that food at the next scheduled feeding time, but not before. So if you normally feed your dog in the morning and then at night, then if they walk away from breakfast, they don't get it until supper. And you try to limit the amount of treats they get throughout the day because you don't want them, denying meals just for the sake of, well, I'm going to get treats. The better stuff comes if I don't eat this anyways. I also like to tell people to make the meals equally as valuable. So if you like to put a bit of chicken broth or something in breakfast, do that for dinner too. Make it consistent so each meal's quality is equal. Or if you're putting some fresh veg or whatever in, or some meat from leftovers from the table or something, you want to put that in your dog's bowl, great, all for it. But just try to do it in a way that the dog's getting the same quality at each meal so they don't get tied to a problem with it. So the next one is after separation. And for me, a separation for the purpose of this is defined as any time your dog can't access you of their own free will. So this has multiple implications. This could be that we go outside and come back in. The door was closed in between us, whether it's a screen door, patio door, normal door, doesn't matter. Could be that the dog went out and came back in and the door was closed between us. Could be that I went to the washroom for just a minute and came back out and the door had been closed between us. Any of those situations, I went to work, came back, got groceries, whatever it is. There's a million and a half different ways it can look. But essentially, if your dog can't access you of your own free will, of their own free will, you've been separated according to them. Now, what happens with dogs in separation is it kind of goes back to the genetics of dogs who go off to scavenge or hunt or whatever. When those dogs come back to the rest of the animals in their group, what happens is the dogs check in. So they do this little who's who in the zoo. Are you still capable of being a good leader? Because there's lots of opportunity for a dog to get injured, whether running or hunting or doing other things, and they need to know that when they get back to the rest of the family, that they can still lead really well, and so they're challenged. And the way that dog is challenged, the leaders are challenged, is by the other dog approaching them and trying to get into their space. If I can get into your space, I'm therefore able to control you, and you're not a strong enough leader anymore. That's the thought process for the dog. Now, obviously, in a domesticated context, it's not as full on as that. But notice that there's a similarity in that anytime we come home, our dog's not just happy to see us. Now, I'll never say that they're not happy to see us. I believe that they actually are, for sure. But they have an underlying motive, and the motive is to find out whether you're still capable of leading. And one of the ways they do that is by getting in and invading your space. So what we do as humans is we ignore the dog. So anytime after a separation, we ignore, which means no talking, no touching, and no eye contact. Until when? Until the dog's relaxed. Because we want our dog to be calm. So we protect our space, say, no, no, you can't just come in my space when you feel like it here, out of my space. And then when the dog's calm and relaxed and doing what Jersey here is doing in the background, this is calm and relaxed to me. Some people will mistakenly think that your dog sitting there looking at you like this is calm and relaxed, but it's not, right? That's your dog is just waiting for you to make your next move, and then they're going to pounce right up and be there. We want the dog to actually shut off and calm down, because remember, when we work from a place of calm and we think about that energy meter, we have a lot easier time getting our dog to kind of make good choices because they're in a state where they can think and process information well. So the goal is calm. We want them to be calm when people come in the house. That starts with us as a family. So we walk in the door, we ignore the dog. We just walk right past. I always tell people to just delay the greeting. Do what you were going to do next after petting the dog and saying hello to the dog. Do that thing first. Then, once your dogs calm down, you're going to wait a few more minutes to make sure they can completely decompress, lower that arousal. Then we're going to invite them to come to us. So this also helps with separation anxiety because the dog doesn't feel this sense of excitement around comings and goings. So it can help with that. If you're not struggling with it now, it prevents it. If you are struggling with it a little bit, it can help it. Okay, so then the other piece is it also helps our dog just to learn to be calm and have zero expectation that humans are going to interact with them the second they see a new person. Because often when it comes to human greetings, that just leads to jumping and over arousal, over excitement, especially in younger dogs. So the importance of the routine is really to help your dog learn that they have to be relaxed before they greet you. And it has a built-in factor of recall because when our dog doesn't get just touched for no good reason, and they actually have to come over to us when we ask them to, we've now built in recall. It's a very simple way to do it. It's very organic because it's just part of how we live around the dog. And so if at every interaction when we come in, we ignore the dog and they don't get free pets, we don't give our affection away for free, the dog learns there's value in coming when they're asked to, right? So that's an important piece to it. So rule number 3 is everything on your terms. So this piggybacks off of rule number 2. Our dogs are highly intelligent animals. I think we often underestimate them. But they also don't fully understand the human world, and they start making decisions that aren't theirs to make. So, in order to help teach them that we're here for them and we're going to make all those big decisions, and in order to help display that message for them, this rule assists in doing so because it takes the pressure off them. So, the idea behind everything on your terms is that we initiate everything. We initiate play, we initiate affection, we initiate the petting, we initiate training. So, whether it's throwing a ball or being petted or whatever they want, they have to wait for us to start the game. Now, we want to make sure that we always understand our dog's needs. And so if we feel like we've been lacking in giving them what they need, which is meals, obviously, for one, enrichment, which is, mind games and things to help them to stretch their mind and that, physical exercise. If we're lacking in any area, it's on us to make sure that we've kind of checked off in our mind, okay, what's been missing today? What do I need to focus on for my dog to fulfill them? But we want to make sure that we're initiating. So what that looks like is an attention-seeking dog is going to be one that comes up and just plops their head in your lap. Doodles, I think, are pretty notorious for this. Dogs in general can be, but especially the breeds that are very human attached. They're going to just wander over and they're going to pop their head right in your lap. So we have to learn to ignore that. We have to shut ourselves down. So we have to cross our arms, cross our legs, kind of give them the cold shoulder, say, no, I'm not interested. When they go lie down and they relax or they go play with a toy by themselves, we call them over. If you want to pet your dog for 3 hours watching a movie and cuddle up on the couch together or on the floor, whatever it is, beautiful. I love that. As long as you started the interaction and you invited the dog over. Because if you haven't, there's two primary problems for me. One is that the dog's invading your space and dictating when everything happens in the house. So they're basically leading and being bossy. And two, we're training them that we actually want them here all the time. And if they're not here, they start to actually feel anxious. So every time your dog comes up uninvited and we start petting them, what we're saying is, yes, you've done the right thing because petting is a positive reinforcement. So the dog made a choice to come over to you, to bring a toy, to just stand there and look at you, to put their head on your lap, and we reinforce it. Good. Oh, good dog. Nice work. And we do that with, multiple people in the house, getting that reinforcement over and over again. It's no wonder our dog's anxious when we leave because we constantly have told it and reinforced that it should be right here beside us. And so we help them, and this is where we look at it from that perspective of putting the needs of the pack or the family first. This is exactly what I'm talking about. What our dog needs from us is a boundary of our space that we say, look, we're going to fulfill all those needs. We're going to have snuggle time every day. We're going to play. We're going to do all the things, but we're going to do it when I tell you. We're going to do it under my rule. For me, it's kind of like my youngest daughter. If she tells me, Dad, go to work. It's time for you to get things done. Go on, get going. I'm like, well, no, it's not. It's not time. I'm not going to do that right now. Who are you to tell me to? I don't understand. When did you become in charge of my day? Right? But for her, if I ask her to do something, there's a level of understanding because I'm leading the family with my wife that she's gonna oblige. Now my daughter still have choice in the matter to a certain extent where she can say no. It's not going to go very well for her, but reality is she has choice. But she chooses to oblige and respect what I ask her to do because that's the relationship and the social hierarchy of our house, is that the adults in this house make the big decisions of what the family's going to do and how things are going to play out. And the kids, while they get to have a say in it as far as, these are the things I like to do, as do our dogs. Mom, I like to play with balls. I don't like sticks or I don't like whatever. The dog has choice in that, and we love to honor them. As the kids have choice in, I like these types of toys or these types of games. Will you play with me? Okay, yeah, but I just need a minute. So, hold on. I'm finishing something. I'll be there in a second, and then we can play together. Right? And so when we have those boundaries set up with our dog as well, they start to flourish and we take the responsibility off their shoulders and they get to relax and they truly relax. And it's amazing to watch the transformation for dogs. But they also stop pestering. So what you end up with is a dog who's fine to be on their own. They're happy and content, and um, because we're meeting all of their needs, we don't have to worry that we're denying them because we're not. We're just delaying. We're saying, look, it's got to be when I'm ready. It's not when you ask for it necessarily. Now, with our human kids, there's lots of times we'll say, yeah, okay, you've asked for this, let's do it. With the dogs, what I say is, dog brings me a ball to play. I say, oh, do you want to play now? And then I just kind of go do something else for a minute. Then I invite them. Say, okay, come here, come on over. That way I'm honoring the fact that they want to do it. But also I get to kind of say, yeah, we're gonna start now. I also like to keep a couple special toys completely separate from all of the other toys that my dog plays with that only come out when we're going to play together, when we have a planned play session, so that they have extra value, they have extra meaning to the dog, and it amps them up. I also like to rotate toys. It's a little sidebar, but I'll put 3 or 4 toys away. Then I'll bring them out and put the ones that are currently out away and rotate them out once every couple of weeks, so the dog doesn't get bored with them, so that they always have something kind of fresh and exciting to play with on their own as well. So the idea here is if the dog approaches you for anything, we just ignore them. But the caveat to that is that we have to make sure we're planning how we're going to meet their needs and take care of all those needs properly. Because it's not an excuse to just say, well, I'm just going to ignore my dog all day. No, that's not fair. Your dog has needs, and as a pet parent, you're obligated, and you've decided to take on that responsibility of meeting those needs, and it's important that we do. So we don't want to deny them that. Following these guidelines, this is setting up a relationship in a healthy way. And we're also allowing our dogs there to not have to interact with us all the time. We're giving them a safe out to say, look, I'd like to actually go lie down for a while and just relax. And we're setting boundaries around our personal space, which is really important. In the context of danger, I'm worried about this thing, I'm going to bark at it, whether it's out the window, beyond the fence, whatever it is. It's normal in the sense that our dogs are built to question new activity. Often, though, a dog's going to decide on the family's behalf if someone or something is dangerous or not. This is a responsibility that we want to take, right? And so what I do then is whenever the dog is making this decision for me, instead of just alerting to something and they carry on, is stay calm, relaxed, and use low energy. What I don't want to do is this pattern of kind of increasing, telling the dog off. So, let's just use the example of a dog barking at a patio door looking out the window. So the dog starts barking, and I say, hey, quiet. Then they keep barking. I said quiet. And then before long, I'm screaming at the dog. I said, shut up, whatever it is, right? And what the dog hears is, well, I don't know any of those words, but that energy is really increasing. We're kind of getting into it together here. This is good, right? And so often, and I'm not saying this is for your family specifically, but often what happens with people is we start to escalate our response and start yelling at the dog, and all they hear is, great, we're all on board. Wonderful, let's go get it. So instead, we use calm energy, we're relaxed, at the first set of barks, we don't move from where we are. We just say, yep, thank you. And the word doesn't matter so much as the way that we say it and the energy we use. And the reason I use thank you is because it's really hard to say in an angry way. Now, the second set of barks, if they continue barking, we have to get up and look. We have to physically get up, go to the window that they're barking out, or get up, go to the fence that they're barking at, right? So put my shoes on, go to the back of the yard where they are and look. Because what they're telling me is, you can't see it, you don't know it's dangerous, I can, and I'm telling you it's important. What are you going to do about it? And as a leader, in the dog's mind, in their context, a leader of dogs will go and investigate danger and make a decision, whether it can stay or go. If it's going to go, the whole pack's going to chase it off. If it can stay, that's up to the leader, and no one gets to touch it. They'll get told off if they try to go after it. So it's up to the leader. And if we don't go and check it out, the dog knows we can't see it. We haven't made an educated decision on this. We're just whatever we're doing. And so we're not leading in that sense. So we get up, we go and look, we stand in front of them, we say, oh yeah, thanks, don't worry about it. We turn around, we walk away. We don't talk to them, we don't touch them. We don't make eye contact with them. We don't look back over our shoulder to see what they're doing. When we do this well and we practice it, eventually your dog will just start to follow you because they've learned from you as the leader that it's not a problem. Thanks for letting me know, for alerting to something new in the environment. I appreciate it. No different than if someone comes to the door and one of my kids says, "Oh, hey, someone's at the door," right? Same thing. They're roof, 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 whatever. They're barking. The dog's saying, "Yeah, there's something here. You should have a look at." And you're like, "Oh yeah, that's not a big deal. Don't worry about it." If they continue barking after you've done that, now it's time to remove the dog from that area and get their arousal level lower. So we're going to block the stimulus by putting them back in that crate with the blanket over, putting them in the bathroom, another room interior to the house where they can't smell, see, and hear whatever it was that was triggering them to feel like they need to protect or to bark. That's the follow through that's often missing from people when the dog continues. So it takes work. It takes us committing to this is what I'd like to see, and the way to get to it is by taking these three steps. But skipping any of the steps means we haven't actually fully committed and we're not going to get a result. We're going to have a dog who continues to bark at everything. So an example of that with our dog, Jersey, is that she will alert to people ringing the doorbell or doing whatever. Most of the time, she doesn't even get up. She'll just lift her head up and roof, roof, because she heard it. It's new, it's here. Hey, somebody should deal with that. I'll look at her and, yeah, okay, thanks. Don't worry about it. And she'll just go back to sleep. She doesn't care. In the backyard, she typically will just kind of sit and watch. She just looks at things. She doesn't bark at them. She sits and watches. If she was worried, I would go out and address it for her and say, oh, yeah, that's not a big deal. And if she's too aroused, I would take the arousal away and support her and say, look, I know that you need some calm, so let's just go get that, right? And that's what's important in this. The goal is to reinforce that after alerting to a possible problem, that you want them to accept your decision and understand that no more fuss is actually needed in it. The walk is our fifth and final rule. Now, with a walk, I have, there's two things that are important to me. There's two aspects to the walk. There's our social aspect where the dog gets to pee, play, sniff, do their thing. Then there's the structured aspect where they're walking with me in a heel, or I use the word walk actually, position at my side with a loose leash. As the leaders, we get to choose when social and structured start and stop, so we can jump back and forth between them as many times as we like on a walk. One thing I do encourage people in is try to start your walk and finish your walk with structure, and manage the energy level of your dog before the walk starts. Because when our dog's energy level is already, let's say, at a 5 or 6 when we are at the front door, then we get out the front door and it's a 7. Then we're to the driveway, it's an 8. Then we're to the sidewalk or the road, and it's already beyond. They're vibrating. So we need to start them at a 3 or 4 or a 2 or 3, whatever it is. And then they go up a little bit as we progress, but they never get to the, oh my goodness, I can't take this anymore spot where they're just vibrating. Whether it's overexcitement, arousal, or aggression, it doesn't matter. All of those are going to lead to the dog not doing well in a structured aspect and probably pulling. So that's what's going to help. Now, I'm going to come back to, you had mentioned that when you guys walk together, there's usually a problem if someone walks in front of the other. And I want to bring you back to rule 2 and 3 on this, because those things, setting up your relationship well with the dog, are going to help in that context when that happens. Because again, remember, your dog has been reinforced that they're supposed to be here. And when they can't be, they get stressed. They're like, I need to be, I'm supposed to be, I've got to be there. And then they can't because they're physically restrained on a leash. And so that's where this all starts to come in together into play. And we can say, okay, when we got that relationship piece sorted out and right, then we can work on these other behaviors in context. So it all starts out keeping that energy level really calm when we start to walk. If the dog's going ballistic when you take the leash out, we have to work on desensitizing that long before we even go and walk. The ways to do that is either wait and try again, and reinforce that we don't go when you're crazy, we only go when you're calm, or we cancel the walk. Now, I like to use something called stop, start, change direction. Off leash, and using a food lure to train them to be in position, let's call it. I don't keep going if they're pulling, and I turn around and wait for them to follow to encourage them. So sometimes when I'm setting up training for walking, it's not about the distance of the walk or the destination. It's simply about training the walk, training to walk. Now, I start all of this in the house, and I'm going to go through that with you, and we'll actually practice a very simple technique I use for building position without a leash on. And this is going to translate into your off-leash walking as well in general over time. When we are walking with the leash, of course, we do, as you stated, have a nice loose lead, and our arm is nice and loose and down by our pocket and relaxed. The last piece to it is we want to finish on a good note. So we don't want to be finishing on a negative note where we're all ticked off and angry and everyone's kind of out of whack. It doesn't help the dog. Those are the things that practically describe leadership for me as it relates to dogs and their understanding of leadership.